I agree.
Dr. West, the other point that I think is not being talked about enough in corporate media, what a surprise, but I also think in a lot of independent media as well, there's a big element of what's going on right now that I think a lot of people are missing. There is a distinct, there is a class war that is being fought on this issue like every other issue. If you look at the loudest voices in the room who are saying Israel is benevolent and could do whatever the hell they want, it is usually people from the affluent class. Everybody else, almost universally, is against this genocide, and it is a genocide, no matter how many ways you spin it. But the people that are saying that this must be done are people who are of exceptional means. I see that across the board in almost every political issue that we're fighting upon today. But this is as distinct as anything I've ever seen. It's very clear that the loudest people who come after Jen on social media for speaking up about this are people who live very, very comfortably. They don't like having their perfect bubble existence being pierced in any way.
No, I hear you. I think that, I mean, we'd have to engage in an empirical analysis to see exactly what, but I do resonate with what you're saying, but I would add this, and you both of y'all tell me what you think. That, I mean, just like the dominant discourse from Washington and so many of the elites in European countries don't believe that a Palestinian life has the same value as a Jewish life. The notion that a Jewish life has less value than a non-Jewish life also has a long history, and that cuts across classes, that cuts across regions. And fellow Christians, you know, we Christians have made a major contribution to anti-Jewish hatred in the name of Jesus. And then Muslims who were much better early on now have picked it up. So I don't want to argue that anti-Jewish hatred or the claim that a Jewish life has less value is necessarily tied to one particular class. That ideology just cuts across classes, religions, gender, and sexual orientation. But in the present dialogue, it's true that the well-to-do have been those who have said, enable that genocide in the name of Israel has a right to defend itself. Wait a minute, everybody has a right to defend themselves. Absolutely. That doesn't mean that the water systems go under, the health systems go under, there's no electricity, there's no food, and there's nowhere to go. That's genocide. That's a crime of genocide. That's beyond war crimes. That's beyond the other kinds of crimes. That's the crime of genocide.
Yeah, Israel's been above the law since 1967 at least, and they don't follow international law, and we generally don't care. In fact, the last time I think I remember something coming up with them with the International Criminal Court, we just said, oh, you know what? We're going to drop out of that. They don't like Israel. We're just not going to participate in the International Criminal Court anymore. So there are no repercussions. And when you say that, like, to me, this is not self-defense. This is like preemptive defense. And that's very, very questionable from an international law perspective. It's a very gray area. But I'm going to say they're in violation. And they just do not care.
Massive violence. But we shouldn't forget, though, the role of the American empire. When the first President Bush told the elites in Tel Aviv, even if you are attacked, you do not respond, because that means we have to respond, and we're not willing to fight that war. They put tremendous pressure on those Israeli elites. And, you know, George Bush is not the best example of courage. Let's just be honest about it. But when the American empire does impose its pressure on its client state, that client state either has to respond positively, or if it responds negatively, it's only for so long. Now, you know, Netanyahu has been able to resist. And when he gave that joint session, that lecture to joint session, and went at Obama, and Obama had already been enabling the Israeli apartheid for so long, he still gets a critique. And Netanyahu does it with impunity, But for example, now if I won, oh shoot, I'm dismantling the US empire. I'm telling you across the board, I'm an anti-imperialist. I want America to be a decent, dignified nation among nations. We do not need to be an empire with total dominance spectrum across the globe and want other nations to defer to us our interests, our image of who we think the world ought to be. No, that's not the way it is. I'm a jazz man. I don't come in dominating. It's one voice among others, and that we have a distinctive voice. There's something that can be very positive about the American voice. We got some decent American folk. We got some great American traditions of abolition and feminist movements and labor movements and anti-racist movements and anti-homophobic movements. They are as American as the Ku Klux Klan. Martin Luther King Jr. is as American as Richard Spencer. But the question is, how do we galvanize and make that more dominant both here and around the world? And what does that usually mean? It usually means we get attacked, assaulted, or assassinated. Character assassination or literal assassination. That is the cross that every freedom fighter must bear in order to attempt to be a leaven in any social loaf, American loaf, Israeli loaf, whatever it is, You know.
Dr. West, as we wind down the conversation, obviously a lot of people want to know what your plan is should you pull off the miracle that is needed right now. If you are able to win, let's say things really start to maneuver in the next year and they are independent debates that are held. We're certainly hoping that you'll have the opportunity to have a bigger platform and raise more money, build more infrastructure, and so on. So what would a Dr. West presidency look like? You know, we've had a lot of distinguished guests on our show that think that you should be announcing who your cabinet would be if you were lucky enough to win. And
we've talked about this. My suggestion, Dolly Parton, Secretary of State. I put that out there to everybody who comes on here because I honestly cannot think of someone who would represent us better. I'm just saying.
She's still got it.
And that was before before that recent show.
Yeah.
Before the recent show.
Oh, I still think that. Oh, yeah, no, Dolly's my girl.
Well, I tell
if you were fortunate,
that 9 to 5 song reminds us of the great Barbara Ehrenreich. We just had a wonderful memorial for her at her nickel and dime classic text. Those two go hand in hand in terms of dealing with working class folk of whatever color. But no, I think that, our first aim is, of course, just ballot access. That's why we're in Utah, California, Arizona, and other places. But if, in fact, the fluidity of the present historical moment is such that more and more people are turning toward something that has to do with a morality and a spirituality in which working and poor people are at the center. And if, in fact, I'm able to make it to the White House and be head of the American empire in order to dismantle the empire, my first thing would be massive disinvestment in military. We don't need 800 military units around the world. We don't need special operations over 100 countries. And to use that money for massive investment in satisfying basic social needs, beginning with jobs across the board. I want to abolish poverty. I want to abolish unhousing. I just spent a day and a half at Skid Row with Sister Madeline. She sings your praises now. You know, Sister Madeline, she's one of our one of the campaign managers. She sings your praises all the time, Sister Jen, and for good reason, for very good reason. But she was there with my wife Anahita and brother Stanley and the others. But part of it is, you see, it's a matter of trying to be candid about the variety of catastrophes. So we make the connection between ecological catastrophe, corporate greed tied to fossil fuel, the nuclear possible catastrophe, war profiteers, the Lockheeds and others making big money on war as people are sacrificed. The link to governmental catastrophe, not just dysfunctionality, but catastrophe. And then it goes all the way to the spiritual catastrophe, which is the inability of us to really generate the kind of capacity so we can have empathy toward each other, to shatter the indifference and callousness. The great Rabbi Heschel used to say, indifference to evil is more insidious than evil itself. Well, that's wisdom. That's profound wisdom. And how do you do that? Well, part of that is spiritual, cultural, but it has material conditions. And those material conditions have to be one in which poor and working people have access to a decent life. And so how do you do that? Well, one, you're going to have a Congress, that's completely oppositional for the most part of what I'm doing. So I got to use bully pulpit. I've got to use executive orders, and I've got to be a moment in a movement that calls for a moral and spiritual revolution that has political consequences, that produces a political revolution. And by revolution, what I mean is the sharing of resources, the sharing of power, the sharing of dignity, and the sharing of access to the sources of a well-lived life.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.